There we are. Hey guys, everybody pop in there. Gavin Syme here. Good to see you all. Let me know if you can hear me. I got myself wired on the mic today because my new little office space here is pretty echoey, and so I thought, well, I'll put a lapel on so I come through a little clearer. But just want to do a live stream, trying to do at least one live stream a week. Good to see you guys in there. Guanmato, Patrick, De Leon, and all you guys pop right in there, smash the like button, and hope you guys are getting notifications when the stream goes well. Make sure you smash that bell icon if you want to get notifications on new videos and, of course, live videos. VB, all you guys, shout out to you guys. Shout out to our Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/Gavin Syme. Ember, howdy. And shout out to our channel backers right here, right down in the corner. You can actually back the channel and pitch in a few bucks a month right here if you like. If you like what we're doing here on the channel, make sure you check out the latest Exile show that I posted last week. Pretty fun show about making Independence Day. And howdy, everyone. So I wanted to take on a couple things. So I'm going to do a few topics today because people ask me, like, what about this? What do you feel about this? More importantly, though, I like to talk about how things relate to actual law, the Constitution, human rights, due process. And we're going to do that a little bit today as we see like this frenzy, the witch hunts, the faction against faction, all of this stuff. We need to keep on message as we see things, you know, like this Supreme Court nominee. And what do? They throw a sex scandal out at you to distract, right? To distract from the fact that these judges are criminals and they have no position sitting and judging anyone. So what do? To keep you from focusing that a judge supported treason, supported the Patriot Act, supported for-profit prisons, and sent people there. Thanks, Justin Kyle, appreciate it. It was a need, right? They have a need to distract you from all these terroristic blue ISIS judges. So what do? They throw a scandal out there. And now faction is fighting against faction instead of looking at the facts of liberty and the Constitution. All right, so what about all this other stuff? What about Cosby? What about cops walking into people's rooms and apartments and shooting them dead or murdering them on the side of the road? All right, what about all these things? What about Colin Kilpatrick? All right? Everybody's all fighting about everything, but meanwhile, what's happening to our freedom and our liberties? They're gone. That's why there's no freedom left, because we're always distracted. So let's talk a little bit about these three cases in particular, real quick. I'm going to try and stay on top of this. And let's talk about Cosby, right? Cosby got 3 to 10 years this week. Was it this week or last week? And they sent him to prison. All right, so here's this old man going to prison, but was it justice? You gotta, and it's easy, right? Especially, this is why government loves sex crime cases. There's witch hunt for sex crime cases right now. I don't mean to diminish from real crimes. The problem is you never know. And this is why. Let me explain to you why you never know. Due process is laid out in natural law. It's laid out in the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment. Due process is laid out in the concepts of human rights, okay? The right to evidence, the right to make your case. Not the case the judge allows you to and the evidence that he allows and the prosecutor allows, but your case. The prosecutor has zero rights. It's really important that you guys understand that. A prosecutor in a lawful situation, the state has zero rights in a criminal prosecution. They have no right to silence you. They have no right to object to your evidence. They have no right to keep you from making your case. The individual that works as a prosecutor, as a human being, of course, he has rights. But as a member of the state has no rights. That's the first thing we lose when we lose due process, is the state has the right to control the trial. And this is exactly what's happening. This is the first reason that no trial in the USA is illegal. The prosecution decides, along with their colluding blue ISIS judge, what gets into your case. So when a person goes to trial, and I have been on trial myself, and I've had friends on trial many times, when a person goes to trial in the USA, the judge decides how they can make their case. The judge decides how they can argue their innocence because they're already assumed guilty, okay? You actually have to prove your innocence, but you only get to prove your innocence in the way the judge allows, which is, J-Sound, thanks, which is the way the prosecutor wants, because the judge and the prosecutor are working together. The judge doesn't work there anymore. The judge's real job is to make sure that due process is administered. In reality, what the judge does is he helps the prosecutor send you to a for-profit prison system. Okay? So what about the Cosby case then? Well, first of all, and this is number one, I'm not here to say what Cosby did or didn't do. But there's a first question you have to ask. When people are suddenly a mob is coming forward, 30, 15, 10, 20 years after a supposed crime happened, especially in situations of sexual related crimes, okay? You should be very skeptical. Anyone with a brain should be very skeptical because the evidence, for the most part, other than he said, she said, the evidence of any assault, and it's important to understand that Bill Cosby was not convicted of rape, he was convicted of indecent assault, I believe is the correct term of the charge that they got him on, felonies, all right? So, wait, the idea that you can come out and have some convicted of assault 15 years after incidents happened, okay, that should be your first red flag. I'm not here to say whether things didn't or didn't happen, but there's a really important principle in law, you guys, and this is what people standing up for liberty are talking about. There's a really important principle of law that goes back to Blackstone, the Constitution, and far beyond. But Blackstone said it's better that 10 guilty escape than 1 innocent suffer. Now, if you're the victim, that doesn't sound very good. Because it's like, well, wait a minute. He has every chance to get off. That's right, he does. In a lawful society, because we can't read minds, we can't prove what's in people's hearts or heads, only God can do that, you have to have a system whereby all the advantages are in favor of the defendant. Thanks, Mikey. Okay, so I'm not here to make a statement on whether I trust Bill Cosby's word or the other people's. It's not really relevant because the first violation that you should suspect is all this lynch mob of people making accusations more than a decade after a supposed crime happened. Okay, there's a whole history and a timeline of all this stuff that went on with Cosby. But let's keep this moving along. The first Cosby trial, remember there was 2 Cosby trials. So if someone accuses you and there's a legitimate probable cause of a crime, the prosecutor, let's say, brings charges. Okay, the prosecutor in a lawful society has one chance. We have a thing in natural law, but also affirmed in the Constitution, called double jeopardy. Anyone who tells you that you're not in jeopardy twice if you have to pay a lawyer, pay the bail, all this stuff, spend years of your life under the thumb, anyone who tells you that having to experience 2 criminal trials is not double jeopardy is either a blatant liar or has never been on trial themselves, probably both. Because if you've ever been on trial, you very much understand the pressure, the pain, the suffering, the mental anguish, and the jeopardy that it causes, even if it's for relatively small charges. Okay? So here's the main thing in the Cosby trial that throws kind of everything else out in the due process spectrum. First of all, we have the suspicion of the charges, right? Okay, so we say, oh, we're going to bring this evidence, but the court holds and allows the evidence that the court wants and allows the defense only to present the case in the way that the judge wants, which of course generally is what the prosecutor wants. So of course, in every case, it's important to understand, this isn't just speaking to the Cosby case, every trial in the USA is 100% unconstitutional and illegal today. Everybody, I would say that probably, regardless of what they've done, everybody that's sitting in prison is there illegally, their trials are null and void, and under the law, the Constitution, due process, and human rights, they would have to be released. Even though some of them have actually done very bad things, right? Now, this is a scary thing for people to think about. Nobody really wants to face this. If you've put millions of people in prison under false pretenses, under illegal trials, kangaroo courts, then what's the solution? You have to tear down the prisons. You cannot fix it. You cannot sort it out. They're all there illegally. You have to assume innocence. Innocence until proven guilty is what I still assume. An illegal trial is not proof of guilt. A second trial, which is 100% illegal under the Constitution, is not proven guilt. Well, Amido, thanks. Okay? Evidence created and fabricated. Why is it so important that a second trial is illegal? It's not just that the Constitution says no double jeopardy. It's that if a prosecutor has a real case, remember the concept of innocent till proven guilty, and it's better that 10 guilty escape than 1 innocent suffer. Think about what the prosecutors are doing. First of all, they charge you with double jeopardy in charging you with multiple crimes for the same act. Okay? There's your first double jeopardy. Another violation. I'm naming 5 or 6 violations that are happening, not only in this case, but I'm actually speaking to all the trials in the USA. Next, what happens? The prosecutor controls to a large extent who the jury is. They control what the jury can hear. If you try to actually speak your mind and defend yourself to the jury in a way that the prosecutor doesn't like, the judge will immediately send the jury out of the room. Okay, remember in the Bundy trials in Vegas, the judge actually said, the Constitution that you're citing is not relevant here. You can't even talk about it. The judge told the defense, you can't give these opinions on your defense to the jury. They're not allowed to hear it. So in the Bundy trial and many others, the jury was out of the room much of the trial, okay? They didn't even hear the facts. The juries are not even getting the facts. What about Schaefer Cox? Total setup. He was convicted of plotting, of conspiring to kill someone who didn't even exist and wasn't even in court to bring the accusation. Think about that. Jeff Winehouse, he was convicted after they charged him with attempted murder when on video, Blue ISIS cops attempted to murder him. See, this isn't just about Cosby, this is about due process. Cosby didn't get it, just like anybody else, all the other people in jail did. I'm not saying whether Cosby or not did anything bad. You can look at the facts and say, wow, this looks kind of shady what he did, right? But we're talking about real law. If you convict someone in a way that is not due process, they must still be assumed innocent. That's why I assume that everyone in prison is still innocent, because even though I know some crimes, terrible crimes, have been committed, as a lawful person who respects the law and human rights and due process, I can see and we can verify, just like I've just done, that due process was not given. And so as the world rages, right, as the sexual witch hunts keep us distracted, does it mean that people shouldn't face consequences and restitution for their crimes, sexual or otherwise? No, if there's a victim, that victim can bring a charge and you can face the consequence for that with real due process. Anything else is illegal. And so think about it, we're convicting people. Let's say, I don't, but maybe you assume Cosby's guilty. Consider the fact that the people who are sending him to prison are guilty of far more crimes. They're guilty of assault, molestation, kidnapping, taking people's lives and locking them in prison, conspiracy with corporations, the police and the judges and the prosecutors sending people to prison for these so-called terrible crimes that they may have committed, right? They accuse them of crimes that actually are terrible, but who knows if that crime was actually committed, because they simply fabricate it. They give you the narrative in the news repeats it. The police write their reports, the news repeats it. The jury hears what the prosecutor wants them to hear. The judge sends the jury out of the room if you try to make your case. This is what will happen if you are charged. This is why I escaped the USA. This is why I'm a refugee from the USA, because I saw where it was going. I saw them trying to force me to give up evidence on my behalf. I saw my friends going to prison and locked away and being tortured, like Schaefer Cox, people like Leonard Peltier who've been in prison for 30 years. And I said, no more. I'm not bowing to these terrorists. See, if you have a man who is a criminal cartel terrorist, and he stands in judgment of a man who may or may not have committed a crime, you should assume that the man he's judging is also innocent, because the man doing the judgment is one of the greatest criminals possible. They keep us distracted with this. Meanwhile, cops walk into people's apartments, okay? They shoot them dead, and then they just say, oh, well, I thought it was my apartment. Right? And our so-called leaders, our so-called leaders, hate thin blue line, resist blue ISIS. Our so-called leaders, like Ted Cruz, who claim to be constitutional and liberty-minded, they come out and they back the murderous police. Now let's take the case of the cop, right? We have to be just. We have to give them the due process they denied us. If that was indeed a killing that was a mistake, right? If there's no evidence that there was any premeditation or murder, right? If somebody actually walked into somebody's apartment and shot a man because they thought it was a home invader, should they be held accountable? Yes. Is it murder one? No. It actually would qualify under manslaughter. And people say, no, Gavin, we have to hate cops. No, I don't hate cops. I want them to have the due process that they've denied to us. So I'm not going to turn and say the system should charge a cop and throw the book at them, right? They should be charged with what they're actually guilty of. But here's the other thing. When I see cops very occasionally go to prison now, how can I support them going into an illegal prison, into a concentration camp, that's just torture, that doesn't help the victims, and sent there by courts that are also illegal. You have to ask yourself, when a cop goes to prison, why did the system want that cop to go down? Obviously, they committed crimes. They're a cop, right? Unless you've maybe only been a cop for a week before you get fired. If you exist as a cop in today's U.S. society, you have to violate people's rights. That's a cop's job. You cannot be a good cop. You can think you're a good cop. You can start out wanting to be a good cop, but the fact is, you have to participate in crimes or stand by while others do so to be a cop, period, in the USA. I don't know if that's the case in all the world or not, but it is in the USA. I still have, by the way, a standing $500 US dollar reward for anyone who can find me a cop that honors their oath. Despite all the hate and rhetoric against me, I've never actually received any remotely legitimate candidate, because guess what? They're not there. Nobody can find one. All right? Thanks, Thin Blue Line, resist blue ISIS. Okay, so what else? Talk about cops. You can see this disparity between cops, right? Every year, the police in the USA, they murder about 1,000 to 1,200 people a year. In Mexico, people are shocked by this because police, despite all the problems in a country like Mexico, police aren't allowed to behave this way, right? Even the prison population down here in Mexico, where I escaped to, is a quarter of the USA. Is there a lot of corruption? Of course there is. Are there places with less corruption? Maybe. But the whole world looks at the USA and they're like, what is wrong with your guys as cops? How do you tolerate this? That kind of behavior from police is simply not tolerated down here and in most of the world, okay? But you have this disparity. Less than, I believe it's 1% of those murderous cops are ever even charged, much less convicted. Because most of them, right? Most of them, unless the state wants them to go down, the prosecution and the judge, they set up that trial the other way to help their blue ISIS buddies. Okay, so you have this injustice, this disparity. Fake courts in the prosecution, fake courts when their people commit crimes. A fake court cannot convict someone legally. Someone cannot be legally sent to prison whether or not you think they committed a crime when there was no due process. And here's what the prosecutors do. Think about this now. They can't convict you the first time. They just did this with Rick Kerber, right? They convicted him of all kinds of fraud stuff that now he's convicted of. He's facing 24 years for, of all this stuff that completely lacked evidence. You know how badly it lacked evidence? The federal government tried him twice. Why did they hate him? Mostly because he's a smart legal mind and he helped people like Ammon Bundy and people from the Bundy Ranch in Oregon and stuff get acquitted. Okay, so they want him to go down. Think about this for a second. They finally convicted him on his third trial. Okay, the lawyers think this is a video game. This is why you cannot have a second trial. If your first trial is hung, double jeopardy is expended. If the jury cannot come to a verdict, you have to be let go under due process. You can't keep having trials, right? Because what happens? The state has all the resources. It's like it's like them playing a video game. They just get to restart from their save point and keep prosecuting you, but you don't. You don't get the time back. You don't get the mental anguish back. You don't get the money you've expended back on lawyers. They drain you and then they charge you a second time or a third time. And guess what? When you're a crook, terrorist, blue ISIS prosecutor thug telling people you're there to defend them and you get to keep hitting reset, that's not an assumption of innocence. You have a whole trial and the jury says, he's innocent, or the jury says, well, we can't decide, and the prosecutor says, well, okay, we're going to do it again. We get to reboot. That's terrorism. That's not a legal trial. And you have to understand, most of the people sitting in prison are sitting there from victimless crimes. The ones that are sitting in prison for crimes where there was a victim did not receive due process. Some of them may have committed the crimes, but the court system is such a sham you could never know most of the time, and many of them never committed the crimes at all. I know numerous people charged and or convicted of murder that there's simply no evidence. And then you come to the real big one, the real distraction. The Hollywood, the sports players, the TV talk shows. You come to people like Colin Kilpatrick. We're going to close off with that because this all ties together of how they distract and enslave you. And I hope you guys are getting something from this tonight, because what we're talking about is big. What we're talking about is blatant, but we've been so brainwashed, particularly in the USA, that people do not grasp the level of which we are enslaved. We're literally ruled by the #1 terrorist organization in the world, Blue ISIS, and their government buddies and their judicial buddies. And their buddies on the Republican and the Democrat and the high and the low and the federal, the state, the county, the city. They're all on the same team, guys. And so you have people like Colin Kilpatrick who come out and they say, well, I'm going to make a huge protest. I'm going to use my platform, right? If you have a platform, you have a responsibility morally to use it for good. That's why I tell you guys the truth, even though I could get way more subscribers and make way more money by playing the party, right? Even though I could have stayed the rising star in the liberty movement that pretends they defend liberty, but really it's just for them and their buddies. I could have stayed cool and a big leader among that movement if I hadn't called them out on their hypocrisy, right? The patriot movement that are actually patriots. Because they want freedom for them, but not the brown person, not the immigrant. No, they have to have permission from government to live, even though the Constitution forbids it. It doesn't apply to anyone else. Freedom only applies to me. See, those are patriots. Those are loyalists. That's what we've come to, a nationalistic society of self-worship and state worship. That's what we have. That's why the USA has fallen. That's why there is no republic in the USA. It's a socio-fascist state. We'll talk about that more later. And you have people like Kilpatrick, and they say, well, I'm going to protest. I'm going to make a statement against the police abuse. Maybe they don't do it all perfect, but that's not the point. They use their platform, and they're speaking of something that is true. And they're derided and ridiculed, and the government uses that division to keep us all fighting with each other instead of saying, wait a minute, he has a point. Colin has a point. You might say, well, I think it's disrespectful what he's doing. Guess what, guys? Real patriotism is not putting your hand on your heart. It's not saluting the flag. Real patriotism is resisting. Our nation was founded by people who fled their country and then turned on it and committed treason against it and said enough is enough and started fighting with the cops because we want freedom. And then quickly hypocrisy was introduced. Quickly tyranny came back, right? Governments tend to do that. That's what happens when people get comfortable and they don't keep resisting. If you don't resist the small tyrannies, the big tyrannies will take over. Now you can look at Colin and people on the right, they might say, well, Colin supported an organization, right, that supports abortion. He donated to this organization. And I see that and I get sad because I'm like, wow, man, how can you not get it? So he just proved that he really doesn't understand the human rights that he wants to be fighting for. You can't say, well, we get to kill babies, but you can't touch our rights. You can't say you have more rights than the other one. From the unborn to the aged, everyone has the same rights. You don't have a right to kill someone. You have a right to your own body, not a right to destroy someone else's. And so we have such ignorance in our society, and that makes me sad, but I see that. And obviously, if I was standing next to Colin, I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you can't support people butchering babies and then say, we want human rights. That's total hypocrisy. That won't work. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to hate on him for kneeling in a protest that's legitimate, you guys. You have to stop buying the propaganda. Whether it's the idiots who believe the propaganda that they're fed about how terrible Mexico is, when in reality they have vastly more freedom than you do in the USA, and it's easily demonstrable. Or whether it's the people that say, I should be able to kill my baby, but I need rights for me. Or whether it's the patriot who's actually no different, who says, I have rights, but the Muslim, the Mexican, the liberal, they don't. See, those so-called conservative right who do those things, they're no different than the far left radical who wants to kill the babies. The blue ISIS who says we're better because we put our lives on the line to protect people's freedom. No, they don't. If their lives are on the line, it's because they're out committing crimes. They don't defend your rights. They enforce the arbitrary edicts of a state. And what is real law? This goes back to the law section on this very channel. What is real law? Life, liberty, and property. And a defender of the law can defend life, liberty, and property for all men equal, or he is not a defender of the law. He is not an authority either constitutionally, either in natural law, in biblical law. Romans 13 heads. It doesn't say that. It says what? What does law say? What does Romans say for us Bible believers? For us natural law, for you natural law atheists. I may disagree with you, but you know what? What does law say? Life, liberty, property, and if you violate those things. you're not an authority. You're not a lawful authority. You're simply a criminal like any other thug. And so as our friends sit rotting in concentration camps, some of them, most of them, not guilty. As people you've never heard of sit rotting in concentration camps, some of whom maybe did commit the crime. But you'll never know the truth on that. Because if a trial is a fraud, you have to assume that they're still innocent. That's why I wanted to talk about all three of these things. That's why I wanted to talk about Cosby, about the cops, about Kilpatrick. See what they're doing. Look up and see the puppet masters that are controlling us one against another instead of us saying, we need to love our neighbor as ourselves. All men are created equal. Hey, JMC in there. Good work over on your channel. Stay out of those concentration camps. Know when to get out, you guys, because if you stand up, they will come after you. Just like they've done to so many of us. That's why I got out in time. And hopefully they won't find an angle, because they don't want me free. They don't want me speaking to you like this. Yeah, and I keep saying Kilpatrick. I'm sorry, the name is hard. I believe it is Kaepernick that I should be saying here, not Kilpatrick. I don't know why I'm saying it that way. Okay, so my apologies. What else? I think we've covered it. We've covered a lot of aspects of not only the fundamentals of law, but the fundamentals of due process. Guys, these aren't just random Gavin opinions that are being thrown out there. These are fundamental founding principles of law, the Constitution, of human rights. And it all ties together from all these different cases that we're talking about. I hope maybe you got something out of this. More importantly, I hope this will remind you to stop falling for the bait, to stop falling for the media witch hunts that give you someone to throw under the bus. To stop falling for the propaganda and start learning what's really going on and looking up and seeing the puppet masters. They're actually manipulating you through media, through nationalism and marching troops and fake wars and illegal courts and blue ISIS thugs. This one went a little long tonight, but we really did talk about some important stuff here, and we covered some topics that I've been meaning to cover and kind of put those all into one video. This fly is driving me crazy. What the heck? Blue ISIS fly. All right? All right, guys. Peace. Love your neighbor as yourself. Resist blue ISIS. Spread this. Share it. Make your own version of it, right? I mean, you can take what I've talked about, verify it, research the history, whatever. Make your own version for your fans. Be a voice for freedom. Stop letting them distract you. Be factionless. Be liberty. Be justice. Be the defender of the innocent, the weak, the fatherless, and the widow. Love your neighbor as yourself. Take care, guys. Stay tuned. More coming soon. Appreciate y'all.